Hey everyone, this is Hanney Seylim, critical faculty, and today I have for the second time Aron Ra. How are you, Aron?
It's all right, doing well. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Look, today I wanted to, I think you'll probably be the best speaker I could ever have in this particular topic for two reasons. One, your undoubted knowledge, vast knowledge of biology and evolution. And on the other hand, your recent endeavor trying to engage the Muslim theology and understand the Quran. I think you've got a full-fledged series of episodes dissecting the Quran, which is very interesting endeavor indeed.
I had no idea it would be that redundant or repetitive.
It is indeed. There are plenty of verses that keeps repeating themselves without any coherence whatsoever.
You could have actually written the Quran down on a page. You know, just say you do a Reader's Digest summary version of some of the Bible stories. And all the rest of it is, believe in the Quran or else you're going to burn in hell. And that's it. And that's all. And just keep repeating that indefinitely.
That's very true. It is very true. So what has been happening in the Muslim world, as you know, probably all around the world at the moment, people are not just having, it's not enough to talk about faith and angels and fluffy stuff. Whether you like it or not, the younger generation want more than that. They want science. They want to invoke more solid proof in terms of keeping their faith intact. So the new trend at the moment is probably happening in the Christian world as well. Hey, our faith is actually backed up by solid science. There are lots of signals and lots of signatures in biology and cosmology to prove that there is a designer. So
I've noticed how often the line is repeated that there are many signs for those who believe. And what that tells me is that there are no signs for those who do not believe. So you have to assume assume the conclusion in advance. And then you have the confirmation bias where you're just going to accept that if existence exists, then it must be a creation and there has to be a creator. That's how the logical fallacy works.
Yeah, it's big into question and circular in nature, obviously.
And there's every kind of logical fallacy is involved in religion, not just with Islam, but I mean with all of them. And one of the ones that I find particularly annoying is the fallacy of false equivalence, where they want to say that our faith is based on evidence and science is based on faith, which is another way of saying that you're just as bad as we are and we're just as good as you are. Except that in my position, as promoting evolution, for example, I can show the actual factual proof the truth to prove what I'm saying, and what the religious position can't. No religion can show that they're any more accurate than anybody else. That all of the religions get together, they can't show that that there's one right one, or that there's one that's right about anything that they teach. There's no truth to any of them. And what I mean by truth is, I always say the truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true, not whatever else we want to imagine or make believe beyond or instead of that. I'll say, so stick to the facts. You can't call something truth if you can't show that there's any truth to it. If you can't show that it's true, you don't get to call it truth. But that's what religion is all about, isn't it? So asserting blind, baseless speculation as if it were a matter of fact, pretending to know things you don't know, that's in every other application, that would be called lying. But in religion, it's called revealed truth. Lies are revealed truth in religion.
Yeah, and faith is supposed to be the highest of virtues. Believing and not seeing, that's supposed to be a wonderful thing, apparently.
Yeah. Believe but there's no evidence. There's no actual evidence. There's no empirical evidence. There's nothing we can test. Well, I have subjective evidence because I believe it. Sorry. Well, I have the Bible. Bible is my evidence. Okay, well, that means that you have the same evidence for your God that the Hindus have for their God, except that they actually have more evidence than you have, because they have so much. They have a whole library full of holy books to compare to your one Bible. So if the Christians will not admit that the Hindus have evidence for their God, then the Christians don't have evidence for their God either. The claim itself, meaning the holy books, are not evidence. So you believe, if every religious person comes to the belief because they believed in a false assumption of authority. They believe because the magic book of fables says so, and so they're going to believe it no matter what. And we're a collection of logical fallacies. Well, everybody else believes it, so I guess there must be some truth to it. That's the most sincere position you can have. But then when you start investigating it, which very few people do actually, when you start investigating it, you come very quickly to a choice that you have to make, like especially with creationists, religious extremists like creationists and flat earthers and so forth. You come to a position where you have to decide whether to remain honest or whether to remain creationist, because it is no longer possible to be both.
Well,
which is
indeed.
Yeah. So see this T-shirt here, See Design Proponentists?
Yeah.
Do you know what this means?
No, no, I don't actually.
You actually don't? Okay, very good.
No.
So the intelligent design movement was wanting to undermine the United States government. So initially, when they started out, they had something called the Wedge Strategy that was accidentally leaked to the public. It was an internal memo that accidentally got emailed to the wider public. So it gets out of the Discovery Institute. Now everybody knows what the plan is. The idea was that they were going to corroborate all of these different congregations, religious congregations, in order to specifically place certain judges and senators and school board members and all of that across the country, so that they would have, Christian, evangelical Christians at every level of state and federal government, judges and so forth, and everywhere. And so they were going to try to then undermine education and evolution however they could. And they were going to try to get to a point where somebody tries to challenge this in court. And then they would have the probabilities were that they would have a Christian who was going to be elected to be the judge in this case. And then the Christian, of course, would rule on the side of the religion instead of on the side of the facts. And then, evolution would become illegal, and we would start teaching creationism, which because everybody's already been taught all of this lies about science, so that they're now undermining their science education. And then once that happens, they're going to be more open to accepting religious explanations, since they don't understand science. That was the game. And then they were going to, the ultimate goal was that they were trying to create a new culture, which also meant a new government. And for some of the factions that I was talking to 20 years ago or so when I started, some of these factions wanted, like the Reconstructionists, for example, that I spoke to directly, they were part of this involvement because they wanted to establish a government that enforced Levitical law.
Wow.
So Levitical law is so much worse than Sharia. Levitical law is like where you get the death sentence for working on weekends and so forth. I mean, just go through Leviticus and imagine if they actually enforced all that crap, where you get to kill your kids if they're disobedient, that sort of thing. So that's what they were advocating for, and that's what prompted me to be an activist. Now, we had a court case in 1987, a Supreme Court case, that ruled that teaching creationism is purely religious and not scientific at all. So it became illegal to teach creationism. And that's what the intelligent design movement wanted to. That's why they call themselves intelligent design. They are creationists. They just don't want to use that word. So they had a textbook that they'd had made called Of Pandas and People. Mm-hmm. And the earliest versions of this textbook, all define creationism. It talks about creationists, but then you have the Supreme Court ruling, and now creationism is illegal to be taught in school. So they took that book and they made a later edition, wherein they did a macro command to change wherever it said creationists, they changed it to design proponents. And where it gives the definition of creationism, the definition became intelligent design. So a lot of people argue that intelligent design is different from creation. No, they are exactly the same thing. They have exactly the same definition. On purpose, they are exactly the same thing. So
sorry, Aaron, I've just noticed there's obviously it's not a typo. Now I know what you're talking about, because that's what was discovered. The evolution of the actual term carrying the actual genetic error.
Yep. So the macro command had a mistake in it, so that there was a misspelling that confused it, and this is the word that popped out: See Design Proponentists, where they deliberately tried to change every reference of creationist to design proponent. Now, what this means is it is literally a criminal conspiracy, because these guys are planning and plotting and doing deliberate actions in order to evade the law, to illegally teach creationism and then change the law after the fact by a matter of sedition, overthrowing the government. So that's how much is wrong with the intelligent design movement. It's not just that it's a bunch of liars lying. It's how and why they go about doing that. So everyone, when they went into the court case of Kitzmiller versus Dover in 2005, every one of the testable claims that intelligent design theorists were making, all of them had already been disproved in science before they went to court. So they were still arguing for things that had already been disproved. And then they had to demonstrate again in court that, hey, these things have already been disproved. So they had to have expert witnesses. They had to have a number of scientists come into the courtroom and explain that all of these things have already been disproved. Every one of these claims of irreducible complexity. And I can go over some of the specifics about that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah. So I mean, in that particular case, a lot of witnesses were actually devout Christians. I believe Keith Miller,
Kenneth Miller,
yeah, and the judge himself, I believe Judge Jones, who
John E. Jones III.
Correct. Yeah, he just said it wasn't science, and the guy was a devout Christian. So you don't need. I mean, that's the thing. You can still. That's what baffles me. You can still be Christian and really believe in evolution or trust evolution to be the right scientific model. It shouldn't really touch it from that particular angle.
Yeah, many of the pioneers of evolutionary theory and of surrounding theories that bolster and support that, the foundations of it. The concept of deep time, of geologic history, of geologic strata, all of these things. And as I said, the pioneers of evolution itself, many of them have been, and some of our current champions still are Christians, Kenneth Miller being one of them. John E. Jones, the judge there, was a George Bush appointed Republican conservative Christian. And so the ID people thought that they were in the win, right? Except that the guy, he's an honest judge, and he knew that the intelligent design theorists were lying over and over again. He wrote in his ruling how it disturbed him, how these people would tout their Christian credentials and brag about being good Christians and everything, and time again lie to hide the real agenda behind the ID policy. And he for Behe, for example. John E. Jones wanted to bring Behe up on perjury charges, wow. But he was advised that we have all of this other stuff. We don't really need to pursue that. I'm wishing that they had, because it would have made an important statement that here Behe has got up on charges and been convicted of perjuring, when these people are trying to advocate for absolute truth. But it's a funny thing, they don't care about what the truth is. I mean, they just don't. Remember that faith is all about make-believe. It's literally making yourself believe something that is not evidently true. And in many cases, not just not evidently true, but not even possible. And refusing ever to admit when you're wrong. Just period.
Right.
That's what faith is all about. So whenever you get into an argument with one of your staunch believer friends, you'll notice that when you get them backed into a corner, they'll change the subject. But well, what about this other thing? And then suddenly they want to talk about geology, or suddenly they want to talk about astrophysics. No. We focus on this thing. You said this thing. Here's the proof that thing is wrong. Admit that thing is wrong before we move on. It never happened. They will squirm and they will change it. They'll do anything they can to get out of that, because they can't admit that everything they believe is a lie.
Yeah, and maybe we can spend some time now and try to show people why intelligent design isn't science. I mean, the one thing that really stood out for me, to me, a scientific theory is trying to explain something that happens in nature and gives it a model, whether it's equations or predictions or something of that sort. But for a scientific theory to be predicated on the denial of another without giving a substitute mechanism of how things have come to be, that's to me not science.
Yeah, well, that's correct. I mean, you can't just refute something because you don't believe it or because you're too stupid to understand it. You have to have an alternate model that explains all that same data even better than the current model does. There's a lot of things that we teach in school that we know are not 100% accurate, like Dalton's model of the atom, for example. We teach a number of different models of atoms, because there are some applications like in stoichiometry and such that where there's certain models that will work and have practical application. We know that Dalton's model and Bohr's model, they're not, neither of them are perfectly accurate. The quantum model even is better, but we can't use the quantum model for stoichiometry. So we have to use other models. We know that we're on the right track, but we also know that they're incomplete. It's like somebody should raise a stick. You're teaching Dalton's model. We know that Dalton's model is wrong. But you have to have something that explains the data better and that works and that makes predictions, right? That we can verify and test and use experiments and future discoveries that constantly back it up. And that's what we have with evolution.
Yeah.
Every claim that intelligent design makes that is testable has been disproved, and all you have left are things that can't be tested, that have never been indicated or vindicated, verified or falsified. There's no way to show that there's any truth to them. There's no way to show that it's wrong, because it's basically magic, right? God can do anything he wants just by saying abracadabra, and he can hide himself perfectly and never ever show any sign by any means of technology that nobody could ever detect God. Well, that's great. You've created this envelope where your God can hide better than everybody else, and anything he does, doesn't matter what it is, it can be attributed to him. When things fall down, we can say that God wanted them to fall down. If you make a decision, if you make a mistake, God somehow did that for you or to you. God somehow controls even you, especially in Islam, where the Quran says over and over and over again that God decides who's going to believe and who won't, right? And then what you will do, and then he'll punish you for doing whatever he made you do. But you have no self-will.
So much for free will.
Yeah, exactly. There's not technically there's no free will in Christianity either, although Christians believe otherwise. Logically, they can't have free will, because if God can prophesy thousands of years ago everything that's going to happen thousands of years later, despite millions of interactions from billions of interactions, trillions of interactions from billions of people, then we don't have free will. He's already determined. He already knows what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. There's no way we could surprise him. So we literally don't have free will. We are just characters in the script that he wrote, and there's nothing we can do to deviate that. But the Quran is actually even more explicit in saying that God actually controls what we're going to do, and that somehow we still have to ask forgiveness for. We know he's not going to forgive us. He doesn't forgive. The Muslim God doesn't forgive shit. And you believe and do good deeds, which means the same thing. Believing is doing good deeds. And beyond that, just like with Christianity, it doesn't matter how evil you are, you can be forgiven if you believe. But if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter how good you are, because belief is it. That's it. Did you buy into the lie? Did you pay your tithe? Did you treat the clergy with respect and give them political and financial power? That's what it was all about.
Yeah, which actually demolished the morality argument, because that morality then is arbitrary. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, people always ask me, well, if you don't believe in God, where did you get your morals from? Well, the way I got my morals, the same way that Christians and everyone else got their morals, is because we evolved as a social species, dependent on a society, which is in turn dependent on mutual cohabitation, right? I mean, for societies to exist, we all have to be able to live together. And for us, any one of us, no man is an island, right? We all depend on our interactions with everybody else. So there are certain necessities in how we get along with everybody else. Now, people who don't have empathy, or people who are selfish, they and cruel, they tend to be eliminated from the gene pool, either by being banished or imprisoned or killed, right? So the people they're removed. And then what predominates? The people who tend to get the most mates, the people who tend to have the best livelihoods, are the ones who show compassion and empathy for other people, the ones that you can rely on to help, the ones, what is our greatest esteem is it's guys who do work, who stand by their word and who help people. And we all love that feeling, right? When we're helping people. I mean, you can love the feeling of being cruel to other people, but that's only going to be of value to you, and that's only if you're defective. Yeah. But everybody else is going to respect the guy who helps out, who helps everyone, who supports everyone. And that's what that's looking at it in terms of population mechanics. It's not very many generations before the guy who stands by his word, the stand-up guy, the supportive guy, the helpful guy is the one that everybody wants to promote. And the guy who's scheming and selfish and vindictive, that guy gets eliminated. Mathematically, we still have these aberrations. Cruel people still pop up in the population all the time, but population mechanics favors the one who is moral. Religion, the threat of a god, has fuck all to do with that. And besides, the prisons are full of people who aren't afraid of their god, because if you have a personal relationship with your god, it means that you're the magic invisible man living in your head, literally. It is an invisible friend, an imaginary friend for grown-ups. It's not like having an imaginary friend. It is having an imaginary friend. So your God, your personal God, already knows every bullshit excuse behind every stupid thing you did. And your God, obviously, because he is you, understands fully why you did that and fully justifies why you did that. So you will go to the electric chair knowing that you will escape from prison by means of that electric chair. And that you will then be joined with God, who fully understands and appreciates what you did for him. And he's already forgiven you. So every evil person is already forgiven by their God. Atheists don't have that bullshit excuse. The only thing that we know that whether there was a God or not, history will be your judge, not God. And the reason that we follow rules apart from our own innate morality, which we all have, is also there's this thing about laws and fines and imprisonment. And we don't really want to put up with that. And if the God thing actually worked to maintain morality, we wouldn't need the prisons and police and all that.
Indeed. I mean, I've always maintained that a purely altruistic human species would have not survived, and on the other hand, a selfish human species would have not survived either. It's the reciprocal altruism that is fantastic. That collaboration, that you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, is the precursor of all morality. You need nothing but that will guard morality and it will guide it throughout. I think. What do you have a different opinion?
No, I'm just thinking that we can be very altruistic. I mean, we don't always do things with the expectation of reciprocation. Very often we'll help someone just because they need help, and this extends to animals and such as well. I mean, if I save a bird who's drowning in a pond, and I just grab the bird and take it out of the pond so that he doesn't drown, and I just leave it, what I may have risked something of myself. The bird might injure me some minor way, but I'm still taking that risk to help the bird because the bird needs help, and the bird's never going to return that favor. Right? Now it is a side effect that when you walk away from that, you feel good about yourself for having done that.
That's I was thinking that. Yeah,
I could just as easily have killed the bird and eaten it, and gotten a better reward out of eating the bird. But that's not what I. Yeah,
interesting point. And we got the two types of people at the moment: the ones that will eat the bird and feel so good about it, nice and barbecued, and the other one who would feel so good about and maybe film it and put it on YouTube, saving that bird.
Yeah. But people will try to argue that anytime you try to do something good, that you're only doing that because you expect some kind of a payback or some kind of a reward. And I disagree. Very often people will put their neck out not expecting anything. Very often people will do the right thing for the greater good. even at a cost to themselves. That happens. You know,
Yeah.
we and this can happen regardless whether you believe in a God or not. And I think there's actually more value in not believing in a God, because when you lay down your life for something else, especially something you believe in for the greater good, you do that not expecting to get any brownie points because you don't have an afterlife. You're just wasting the one life that you have, and you're bringing it to a premature end. I think that's a more and better sacrifice than the guy who thinks he's going to continue living 5 billion years with magic powers in heaven. You know?
Yeah, but I was always thinking about that. Could that be ingrained in evolution, that even though you're not expecting any immediate rewards or even a bit of dopamine rush or something like that, and could it be just by making sure that your environment that you live in is good enough and safe enough for your offspring and even you on the long run? It's not an immediate reward, but just doing, you would expect then people will do the same thing as you do, or at least you hope so. Then the environment as a whole is better for us all. We're all safe. We're all feeling good. We live in a better society. Your offsprings are going to have a better future, or at least a safe future. And with that, you're probably doing all of that without even you realizing, because it's ingrained in evolution.
Yeah. Now, if I help something because someone is in trouble, I'm not doing that because if I see a small child out on the street, and a dog is running up to attack that child, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in against the dog. If I can get there fast enough, I'm going to jump in with the dog. Even if I can't get there fast enough, if I can minimize the damage that's being done, I'm going to jump in with it. I'll risk my life against the dog. We all would. I'm not bragging about it. Everybody everybody in the planet would do that. I think that anybody worth breathing would do that. We don't expect that child to reward us. We don't expect anyone to reward us. And we're risking our lives in doing that. But we would do it. And there's not a question about it. And some people want to argue that we can't have a morality, that we can't do altruistic, we can't do good deeds without expecting a reward. I find people who believe that very disturbing. Just like I do the people who say that the only reason that they don't run around raping and killing and vandalizing everything is because they know that God is watching them. Well, then they don't have morality. They really don't. If they lost belief in God, they still wouldn't be raping or killing or vandalizing, because they know that's not the real reason they don't do that. Now, the fact that anybody would think that killing and raping and vandalizing would be fun, that's disturbing too.
Yeah.
Penn Jillette famously said that he has raped all the people he ever wants to rape, which is 0.
I don't know if you remember, Christopher Hitchens always talked about that novel, When It Was Dark. He always invoked that situation, that old story. It was written before the First World War, where they've discovered the skeleton or the remains of Jesus with the crown of thorn, and suddenly they realize there is no God, and people start fornicating on the streets, and morality is all over. And Christopher Hitchens always said that that's obvious, it's never going to happen, because we always act as if there was no God. We don't do things because there is God, or we do things or don't do things because of laws, because of our moral systems, and it's never about that. But we somehow backtrack and then try to justify our actions by that supernatural entity that there's no proof of, to be honest.
And there's I go a little bit further than just saying there's no proof of it. There's no good reason to believe in such a thing. I mean, it's all just misinformation. There's not any of it that we can show to be true, but there's a whole lot we can show as false. I mean, we know there was no Adam and Eve. Period. Fact.
Couldn't.
There wouldn't. What? And we know that evangelical Christians, when they are trained in science, will admit that there cannot have been an Adam and Eve. That's just the fact of the matter. We know that, Jewish rabbis have admitted that the Exodus never happened. You know, we know that there was no global flood of Noah's Ark. We know that the Tower of Babel not only didn't happen, not at least not as described, but it would have been a shitty thing to do if it had happened, because it means that God says, "Oh, look, these people are building a magnificent building. Why can they do it? Well, they do it because they can communicate with each other, and then working together, they can do anything. So I need to divide their languages to stop them from being able to do great things." What a shitty God! You believe it if that's the God you believe. And we know that nobody was swallowed by a fish and lived inside a fish for 3 days. We know that blowing a trumpet didn't cause the walls of anywhere to fall down. We know the sun didn't stop in the sky. None of that shit happened. You know, and so it's ridiculous to believe in that. And it's worse to say that you have to believe that or else suffer a threat of a fate worse than death.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was listening to Bart Ehrman the other day. He's written a book called Heaven and Hell, and he's arguing that actually Christianity never talked about hell. They were talking about annihilation of. It actually makes sense. If there was a creator, you're a horrible person. You're turned back to the nothingness state you were. You know, but to put you in an eternal torture, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's actually
it's the same thing as the Quran. Surprisingly, it's amazing how close early Christianity is with early Islam, because you know that all these bodies on the Day of Judgment, they're all supposed to come crawling out of the graves. It's not their souls. It's not the supernatural aspect. It's your physical body, and your physical body still has to eat for whatever reason. So the Quran says that our heaven is basically a hotel in one of the upper layers of heaven, which is in the vault of the firmament that people used to believe in, and that we would live there forever, and we still have to eat, and we still have to drink, and we still have to have sex, even though we don't have to procreate anymore. There's no point in that, but we get all the sex we want. We have sex robots as well as our wives. So our wives now have to watch us engage with other women that were created for our purposes that have no souls or free will.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I remember I think we were talking about that in one of your episodes about the Quran, and the word huri, which is the 72 versions. It's translated in some other Arabic text as white raisins. And I've always wondered, you know, you destroy yourself and you turn into pieces, and you're presented with a plate of 72 raisins upon your resurrection. So it'd be a bit of a bummer.
So I haven't quite finished the Quran. I want to say about 3/4 of the way through. But I was under the impression that the 72 virgins thing wasn't actually in there.
Yeah, it's not in the Quran. It's in Hadith. Yes, for sure.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
But what is in the Quran is that you will get virgins, and they didn't exist on earth. They were created for you, and they don't have a free will. They don't have a soul. They're these meat machines that do what you want them to.
Yeah. And the very sick thing is their hymens keep sort of reconstructing themselves as if, you know, I think it's I don't understand what is so value about that sort of thing, the penetration, and it's very painful act, you know,
because you want that inconvenience every damn time.
I don't think it's really pleasant.
Yeah. I like there was a Scottish comedian whose name escapes me at the moment. But he said that he doesn't want 72 virgins. He says, just give me 2 fire-breathing whores.
Experience is everything, eh?
Yeah.
Okay,
the Quran was clearly written for people, largely people who could not get women, who were not successful people. I mean, I've never seen a religion more tailored to incels than I did Islam. I mean, it's just amazing how it's the things that they offer do not appeal to me. They would only appeal to a young man who has no success with women, and generally has very little success at all.
Exactly. I mean, look, imagine the world right then. You know, it's a desert, and all the enjoyment and all the pleasure you can think of is mating with a woman and a bit of nice food on the side. That's your ambition.
Yeah. And we all get sofas. We can sit on sofas for eternity in a lobby of a hotel. And we also get houses for whatever, and the people in hell get houses too, which I thought that was amazing. So you only get burned and tortured 8 hours a day, and then you have to eat these ridiculous little fruits that look like skulls, and they all burn, and you have to drink boiling water, which would be refreshing from a fire. If you're already on fire,
lower temperature for sure.
Ooh,
that's refreshing.
Boiling water.
Have some more of that magma, please.
And then you're going to move into then you have houses. What, you go sleep? So the Quran doesn't have this concept of an afterworld, meaning someplace after you die. This is resurrected flesh walking around on a still existing earth, right? It's in a material plane. Well, Christianity kind of had that too, but they forget these bits. The Christians don't want to tell you about how Jesus is saying, what book was it? In Timothy, I think, where Jesus says that he personally there will be a lake of blood that he creates by crushing the unbeliever in a bloody winepress. Yeah, so that's a Christian belief. Well, I can't even call it a Christian belief, because what Christian believes that? But it's in there. It's in the magic book of fables, where Jesus himself says that, except that, of course, it's not Jesus ever saying anything. It's always someone else saying that Jesus said that. And in this case, it's not even in the Gospels. It's in a different book, and I think it's Timothy, where, whoever wrote Timothy is saying that Jesus said that.
Yeah. Okay, we just slightly go back to the intelligent design. So William Dembski, obviously not even a biologist, is a mathematician. And remember, he was caught, I think, outside of the scientific fields, talking about if Jesus wasn't there, then it's all in vain, sort of thing. He's actually confessed his faith explicitly, but I think he was the champion of the specified complexity,
which he never specified.
The information theory, so he's obviously a computer dude, and he's telling us about all the information in the DNA. And that's what the Muslims say at the moment. It's like, look at the DNA and the cell. It's got so much information crammed in, and that's your basic building block. How did it get to be so complex with very little time?
That's the amusing thing about that argument, is that they take the most complex thing. They think that complexity implies the simplest answer: gods and magic. Gods and magic are always the wrong answer. Every time we've ever tried to answer something with gods and magic, it's always turned out to be the wrong answer. And the right answer always turned out to be a whole new field of study, previously undreamt of and vastly more complex than our supernatural excuses. It used to be that diseases were considered witchcraft, comets and movements of the stars were considered omens, volcanoes were God himself, the epilepsy was demonic possession. All this kind of shit was all attributed to supernatural causation. Every time we figured out what the reality is, it's always vastly more complex. So if we ever do come up with a more complete or more accurate explanation for the origin of life, or for the origin of the universe, if there is one, then it would again be so vastly more complex than was previously thought, that it'll just make God look even more ridiculous. I mean, everything we attributed to supernatural, always, by comparison to what the reality is, always turns out to be stupid. I mean, it's like imagine a child walking into an OBGYN and talking to an obstetrician and criticizing the obstetrician for not believing in stork theory, right? Because you're teaching sexual reproduction. Well, I'd much rather believe in stork theory, because that's my storybook says so. Arguing with creationists is just that dumb, except imagine, instead of it being a 4-year-old child, imagine it's a 40-year-old man still saying that shit.
Yeah. I think
it's still just as stupid. They just don't understand that it is.
They're taking Occam's razor a bit too far, trying to appeal to simplicity. And that's actually what's been actually pondered at some point. I was talking to Dan Barker, and he was saying, because that situation where he's saying, well, if it's complex and your maker must be at least as complex, and who designed that complex entity? And now the new argument is, no, God is actually very simple. He's simple indeed, eh?
It is the simplest answer we ever thought of. It's like when the people, there were people who thought that there's a tiny person inside the television talking, or there's a little band of musicians inside the radio, right? There are people that are that dumb.
Or in the semen, remember the small person within the semen too, and it looks like you, just like you, and it's a funny one. But so I mean, also Michael B, he talked about that mouse trap, and he was talking about the parts of the mouse trap, the latch and all these things, and he's saying, well, I can understand these components being put together, but for each of these parts of the components, they're complex enough, and how did they come about? But for some reason, they keep neglecting that these things could have also evolved individually too. What is the problem?
And then when you look at anything, any pattern that we recognize that comes from the molecular level, that the numbers are going to be incomprehensible to our minds. That's any pattern. That's not just life. That's practically anything. If it creates a pattern big enough that we can see it, but it's made out of molecular compounds or whatever, then the mathematics on just what that is, the emergent property of what that is, are going to be incomprehensibly vast. And we're going to be so impressed. Ooh, look how many zeros and decimal points are in that. Oh, no. Magic invisible man must have did that because it's really complicated and I'm really stupid.
Yeah. I mean, just give me a little bit about that Discovery Institute, because I believe from what I've been reading, that intelligent design is just can't really have anywhere to go. And it's Stephen Meyer running the Discovery Institute. This is the current source of the intelligent design information, and it's almost like it's an abandoned sinking ship sort of thing. What's the situation like? Is it still alive and kicking?
Well, I haven't heard much from intelligent design to people, not in many years. I know that they're still involved in some scams. They still will never admit that they're wrong, because of course that's faith. That's what faith is all about. Never admitting when you're proven to be wrong. They're still all about promoting religion instead of science, even the ones among them who are scientists. And it's really sad to see that. It's based a lot on prejudice and ignorance, especially the God of the gaps fallacy, where if you can't explain something, then somehow it becomes evidence for God. They just want to believe that they're the reason the universe exists, that the universe was created just for us, and we have a special magic purpose, even if that purpose means to die some pointless way as a pawn and then be doomed forever to kiss the ass of a strangely of a strangely insecure deity.
Yeah. I mean, the Kalam cosmological argument, this was borrowed from the Muslims. Al-Ghazali and William Lane Craig ran around parading it for quite some time, until I think he was hit by Sean Carroll at some point to pinpoint all the issues with his science. He still does it though. It never deters the believers, because you could debunk them, show them that they're wrong, but they will go still around you and repeat the same argument as if nothing happened.
I've seen how William Lane Craig continues to use the Kalam cosmological argument, even though it's based on it's got two fallacious failures, at least. And then I've also had the same problem with it was some young Earth creationists who prominent names. And like one guy who always says that evolution teaches we came from a rock. And I've shown him directly that there's no evolutionary textbook, no evolutionary professor ever taught that, nor is it even possible. Here's how a rock is defined by geologists. That doesn't apply to the earliest organisms. The earliest organisms didn't even have minerals in them. So in no sense, in any possible way, could you be correct? Not even standing in a chair with your head on sideways could you be correct. That's just wrong. You told a lie. You need to admit that and stop repeating it. But of course, he just keeps repeating it. 10 more debates after me, he's still repeating the same thing that he knows is a lie. But it doesn't matter, because it makes him millions of dollars.
Oh, indeed. Yesterday, I had a conversation on my channel in Arabic. There was a subject that people wanted me to speak about, which is the future of evolution of humanity. Are we going to continue to evolve. And I showed some evidence that up to maybe 7 or 10,000 years ago, that lactose intolerance and how we evolved to be able to absorb that and use it as a nutritional value while we struggled in the past. But one situation that actually I was surprised about, you think the brain is going to get bigger because this is the capacity and everything. But as a matter of fact, it's shrunk by 10% from about 1,500 centimeter to about now 1,350.
Yeah, and it shows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, damn.
But are we talking here efficiency? We're talking that we're moving from the 3.5 floppy disk that it was so huge and will only contain 16 megabyte of capacity, and to the thumbnail now that we can have 2 terabytes in a smaller area.
Oh no, because I have to. I wish that I could believe that we're becoming more efficiently minded, but I know that natural selection doesn't have the effect on humanity that it used to do. So it's allowing stupider and stupider people to proliferate. You've seen the movie Idiocracy. You've seen the premise, right? So intelligent people breed less because they're intelligent people, but dumbasses breed all the time because they're dumbasses, and that means idiocracy. So we're getting dumber and dumber, and nothing illustrates that, I think, better than the last 4 years.
Because the other theory is, domesticated animals, when they're compared to their counter wild parts, the counterparts in the wild, they host smaller brains. So a wild horse will have a bigger brain than a domesticated one because they don't need to have that much intellectual capacity to get their food, their care. It's all been cared for. Is it a case of domesticated humans? We've self-domesticated?
Yeah, this brings up the concept of transhumanism, which is sadly misunderstood by a whole lot of people. What transhumanism really means is that we have to take over our own evolution, because it would be literally inhumane to allow natural selection to continue to guide us. We should be instead using something that was like illustrated in the movie Gattaca, where we genetically select traits. We have our babies born healthy. We identify whether they're going to have a dental morbidity, and so we can give them the PAX9 mutation so that they don't develop molars or the third molars, and so they won't have impacted wisdom teeth. We can give them certain mutations that we know have huge advantage in humanity. We need to take control of our evolution, and not just, and we can't continue to let everybody be born and proliferate and procreate, because we know that natural selection, cruel as it is the thing that maintains a certain status quo. We can't just let ourselves deteriorate by not having any control features either. We have to be able to genetically enhance. We have to be able to genetically modify ourselves, and we have to be able to go with biotechnology when we fail that. I mean, when I mean biotechnology, I mean like the old concept of bionics, for example. The $6 million man. Prosthetics of artificial limbs. There's an awful lot. There's many different avenues that we can take on this, and we can do several of them at the same time. But we do have to take over our own evolution and not subject ourselves the way we used to. Can you imagine if we still had natural selection applied to us? I mean, we'd have to be in a hunter-gatherer situation, and if we were somehow dropped to a hunter-gatherer situation immediately, we would be decimated. We would be reduced to 10% of our population. So
if we take over our own evolution, so let's talk about dogs, for example. I mean, dogs, obviously, with the artificial selection that has been happening at the moment, which is very, very dominant, mostly apart from some wild species in Africa, the wild dogs and stuff like that. But the domesticated dogs, do they still, although they're been domesticated and artificially selected for traits and stuff like that, would they still be subject to natural selection over a very, very long period of time, even in minutely?
Yeah, natural selection and artificial selection are both working on the same mechanism. They're both selecting for random mutations. The difference is that natural selection is seeking to enhance that animal. Or it's not seeking. I don't want to be confused about that, but obviously the net benefit is for the animal. Whereas artificial selection, we breed things for us, not for them. So we breed dogs we want, not for the benefit of the dog. That becomes really obvious when you look at the kinds of things that we breed, right? We breed things that are not definitely not for their advantage. It was for ours. But natural selection improves the animal instead of. Can you imagine natural selection making something more delicious for a predator? No, it works exactly the opposite. We breed things to be delicious to us.
Right.
That's exactly the opposite of what natural selection would do.
But if we take control of our own evolution, so we could end up picking traits for ourselves that we think on the short run they might be good for us, but they end up being, because they're probably a bit of arbitrary, like blue eyes or beautiful skin, or maybe a beautiful skin will be not as resistant to sun rays and end up being beautiful to look at, but not very practical. So we could be, while selecting for traits that are appealing to us, thinking that they're good for us, we don't see the big picture that the blind forces of nature somehow are able to see or foresee or whatever, and then end up doing something that could be not good for us as a result.
Okay, so you have you have an embryo, and you're going to fertilize that embryo, and it's not even fertilized yet, but you have an embryo and you're going to fertilize it. You have a sperm cell, and you do a genetic analysis on both of these, and you identify certain mutations that this will have a propensity. This child, if we combine these two, would have a certain propensity for high blood pressure, and it would have a certain propensity for cholesterol, and it would end for these other. If you see something for like Down syndrome, which is like too many chromosomes, well, you right away you recognize that. So there are ways that we could correct that, and so it's still the same child, in that it's still the same egg and the same sperm, but the defects have been replaced with better defects. Like I said, the PAX9 mutation is a defect in that it causes the anagenesis, or the failure to produce that third molar that is what causes impacted wisdom teeth. And because we evolved from larger apes, and so our mouths get smaller, but we still have the same number of teeth packed into them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have those third molars, you don't have impacted wisdom teeth, and you're perfectly fine. So, and there's a population of people that they've identified, like 100% of participants in this genetic study who come from this area all have that same mutation. They all lack the third molar, so they don't need the kind of dental situation that, and the morbidity that comes with that. So you can spare people a lot of, and then there's certain mutations that we can give them too that would be stellar. There's like particular mutations that have been identified for reducing HDL serum cholesterol, and for unbreakable bones, and twice the muscle mass at half the fat. There's one mutation. If you get a double copy of this one mutation, you can have twice the muscularity of a normal person and half the fat. You're just insanely strong. You look like you go to a gym every day. You never go to a gym in your life. Doesn't matter. You've still got that massive muscle mass, like ancestral apes have. They don't have to go to a gym. They're just built like that.
Yeah.
Right. So we can improve people this way. Now you're right that people can make ethical, questionable ethics on like designer babies. Well, let's do with green eyes and whatever, or come up with a different mutation. Yeah, it's possible to misuse anything, and it's possible not to use it and it still be a misuse.
It is very interesting. So I understand, Aron, you said at the very beginning you've got an engagement and you want to finish in an hour. So in respect of that, I want to give you sort of a last word in terms of how's intelligent design is now seen in the US and the Western world? Has it been put to bed for quite some time now? Because it's been paraded here right now that this is the most recent of science for some reason. It's a trend, and this is the truth they don't want you to know.
It's a collection of lies, and there's no science to it. There's no, literally, this is the takeaway. There is no truth to intelligent design. Full stop. It definitely isn't a science. It's anti-science. It's an argument against science. It's a means of undermining science. We know that evolution is real and an inescapable fact of population genetics, fossils, and phylogeny. Anybody that has questions about that, I've offered to prove evolution to your satisfaction. And the creationists tend to run away from that because they just want to make believe what they want to make believe. But evolution is real, and it's demonstrable and verifiable and traceable, and we can confirm it with experiments and with laboratory experiments and with discoveries and so forth. We've done it over and over again, and it is repeatable and all of that. Everything the creationists pretend that it isn't, it is.
How long is your Fallacy challenge has been around for now?
A decade now. The Fallacy challenge unanswered for a decade.
Unanswered. Okay. Right, you're on your way to break the record of that infamous magician. What's his name?
James Randi, who I'm sorry to say he was a friend of mine who I'm sorry to say died earlier this year.
Yeah, fantastic man. Yeah, his challenge stood for 25 years, and all the YouTube tests are there to show for. I mean, I always mention him as something to show that there is no supernatural. $1 million up there for the taking for quite some time, and nobody.
Yeah, I'd like, if anybody wants to hold to any notion of intelligent design, okay, show me something intelligent design claims that we can show is actually true. I can show you things about evolution that we can definitely prove are definitely true. Intelligent design can't ever. Period.
Aron, I'd like to thank you so much for your contribution to information, truth, science, and being so good sport about the whole thing. You're a science communicator in a very charismatic way. You provide information such a beautiful and easy way, down to earth. You're happy to chat to people no matter what they are in life, to show them the strength of the theory of evolution, and so we can actually attach ourselves to truth and reality, not to delusion. So thank you one more time.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later. Goodbye.